Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over my process of creating large-scale 3D environments all inside of Blender. Here's a few examples of some of my past work. It's really only 3 steps to achieve this look. Those steps are going to be our displacement, lighting, and volume. So now we're going to jump into Blender and start creating our large-scale 3D environments. So our first step is going to be creating our displacement. There's really 2 ways you can create displacements inside of Blender, at least 2 popular ways for landscapes, and that is either importing a image texture or using one of Blender's popular add-ons, the Ant Mesh Landscape Generator. So the first technique we're going to be covering is the Ant Landscape technique, and that's right here. Make sure you have your Ant Landscape add-on enabled in the preferences, then go over to Blender's object mode, punch Shift A in the 3D view, and click Landscape. So now we have our default landscape in the scene. So with a wide variety of options, you can start off with anything. For this tutorial, I would go with something like Mountain 1. This gives us a pretty good base. Then I would work on increasing your subdivisions and then also tweaking this to get the desired look you're going for. So while I do have a technique for texturing a mountain range like this using Blender, I'm not quite ready to share it yet because the results are less than ideal. So that leads us to technique number 2, and for that I like to turn to Gaia or World Creator. These programs are specially designed for creating these 3D landscapes. They're very streamlined and the results are hyper realistic. However, if you don't want to spend hours inside of these programs, I actually made 50 of my own maps, which you can check out in the website link below. I'm going to personally go to the ones that we created. So I'm going to our downloads and I want to do snowfall, and I already know I'm going to be doing a snowy range mountain, and snowy range v1 is one of my favorites. Dragging all 3 into the program, it's pretty self-explanatory. Let's go ahead and delete this base terrain and we're going to punch Shift A. Let's add in a plane. And now we're going to go to that material we were using earlier, and we're just going to connect everything. So we're going to connect our diffuse to the base color. That's going to take a while to load in because these are 8K textures. We're going to punch Shift A right here. Let's add in our normal map. And now all we need to do is add our displacement. So we're going to search in a displacement node right here. We're going to drop our color into our height. We want to make sure we are in cycles, and we want to go to the experimental features. This is what's going to make this possible. For this to fully work, we need to choose a dicing camera. Let's go ahead and choose camera 1 right here. Right now, we're going to be dicing at 1 on our render and 8 on our viewport. I'm going to change our 1 to 3 just for render time purposes on final export. Then we want to go to our modifier right here. Under our modifier panel on generate, we want to go to subdivision surface. Let's go ahead and drop that in, go to simple and check adaptive subdivision. Awesome, so you can see our final render scale will be 3 pixels and our viewport is going to show 8 pixels. And then finally, under material properties, we're going to click on that under our settings and go to displacement, and bump. Sweet, so we have everything checked off, but nothing is happening quite yet. That's because we have to actually be rendering to see this displacement taking place. So let's grab the camera right here. I have a camera track tag already on it. We'll point it on the landscape. We'll save the project file because we are in experimental mode. It is very unstable. And we're going to go to our rendered view. So now you can see Blender is actually rendering out this landscape fully displaced right here. We'll go to our material settings and we'll just make sure everything's hooked up. Oh, we missed our normal maps. Let's go and take our normal and plug that into normal. That's just going to add some more high frequency details that we didn't really want to fully convey in the displacement. Obvious reasons, it's easier and cheaper for render times to do it under the normal map than the displacement map. So they're kind of working in tangent together, which is nice. And then also you can change your mid-level height if you want. I'm going to change the scale up to something like 3. That looks pretty good. And a mid-level of maybe 0.1. And that should get us around the ballpark of where our plane should be. And another thing I forgot to mention, sometimes there's this bug inside of Blender where if you don't set your scale to 0.99, and I'll just take this off to show you to prove it, it adds these weird kind of edges in. So just make sure to, if you're getting that effect, type in 0.99 and it's just going to pop everything out a little bit and get it out of your way, which is much more preferred over having that ugly line there. But now that we have our base terrain set up, it's a matter of finding our camera angle, composition, and lighting, which is step 2. So let's go ahead and drag this camera down right here. and I'm gonna punch 0 right here to snap into camera view. I'm looking to kind of find a vantage point where I'm kind of looking out at a mountain range. Another thing I wanna do here is go to our camera settings. We're gonna add a depth of field. We're gonna punch Shift A, and then let's go ahead and add in a empty plane access. And this is when our depth of field is going to be attached to. We want to be careful here as far as setting up this camera, because we can easily start making this scene look like it's too small. So I'm going to call this object focus. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this focus object right here, and I'm going to just attach it to one of these little mountain ranges. So let's go over to our camera and increase the focal length to 80. That's looking already a lot better right there. Let's take our f-stop up to something like 5, just because we're working on such this small scale right now. The camera is going to behave very weird physically. And let's go ahead and just move this mountain range around and find an angle that we really like. So now that I've added these mountain ranges in and kind of fixed it to how I like it, I found a good composition right here that I really like. It's time to start lighting the scene and getting it ready for the final render, which is our one of our last stages. So let's go to our world settings right here. First thing is you're gonna have a regular black background in Blender. I like to do something that has some sort of light, so we'll do like a 0.3. You know, we could add a little blue in there if you wanted. I usually like to do all that creative color grading inside of Photoshop. For now, I'm just gonna leave it at plain white, just to have a blank slate. Also, another thing that's gonna help you out is a volume scatter. So I'm just gonna throw that in right there, and it went dark. That's okay. It's time to add in our light. So we're gonna use a spotlight. So Shift A, light, and then add in a spotlight. I have mine right here. Another thing you're gonna do is add a object constraint under there and do a track 2. So when we turn on our spotlight, what essentially this track right here is gonna allow us to do is it's gonna allow us to move the light over the landscape. You can see that right there, and find a composition we really like. So in this case, I put a spotlight right here on this little foothill, and this is where I talked about the layering. Actually do really need to move these up into our light group right here. And then I added in another spotlight right there, blasting that out. And it's also tracked to a track, so I can move it around. So we really only have 2 spotlights lighting this. This is a great start. You know, we talked about volumetrics. You can do a volume scatter right there. Something that's really going to sell this are clouds. You know, this looks great, but it's very flat and it's very monotone. It's almost like it's shot in a studio and it's a miniature. I want to add a lot of variation and depth into this, and volumetrics, and especially high quality clouds, are a great way to do that. So just like with the landscapes, there's really 2 ways you can do volumes inside of Blender, 2 ways that I like to do volumes, and one is just create the volume from scratch. So I just added in a cube right here, and what I did is I deleted the surface volume, added in a principal volume, and then I just put in a noise texture and a color ramp, and you can kind of see right there we're getting some cloud-like effect. To me, this is a very primitive volume and not very highly detailed. I want something that's designed and simulated. So what I have done is I've also created some clouds. A while back, actually, I did a cloud study inside of Houdini. So now you can kind of see how these clouds are layered with our scene, and I'll bring in our camera right here. My biggest piece of advice when using clouds is to have them work for you in your composition. You can see how I've kind of covered up this part of the mountain and added a little bit of dynamic and interest right here, and then I also added a little bit of a cloud right here in this corner, and I have them kind of framing up this mountain and obscuring these bigger mountains in the background. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Feel free to go check out these clouds as well. I have never seen any clouds like this. This is why I created them. They're fully simulated with Pyro, and they're very high detailed, as you can see in this render. So that pretty much concludes it, guys. I think I covered everything. Let me know below in the comments if you want me to expand on something more. I'm planning on doing a lot more landscape tutorials in the future, including creating the textures from scratch, the textures that you see on this mountain right here from scratch that are really procedural and highly detailed, so we can really punch in some interesting details out of it. So stay tuned for that in future videos. As always, you can check out the Patreon for project files or check out my website for assets. So all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and peace out.